You're probably just listening to this episode because you're probably trying to figure out how this guy can relate a pool to leadership. Guys, I've actually had this thought for a little while this summer. It started as we came back from a 5-day trip where we were camping down in Arkansas. When we came back, my pool was absolutely green. I'm not talking about a little bit cloudy. It looked like freaking pea soup out there. It was disgusting. I immediately thought, damn it, Steve. You forgot to make sure the maintenance was up on the pool before you left. Before we get into that, though, let me take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Steve Baumgartner, your host and founder of the Fire Forge Leader podcast. And my humble mission here today, and the mission of this podcast, is to serve you through providing knowledge, tools, and resources around leadership strategies on 3 primary battlefronts. Those battlefronts are simply in the workplace, out in your community, and most importantly, with your family. Now let's dive on in.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forge Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in the Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
So guys, I don't know if you all have pools or not, but if you keep up on the maintenance and keep the chemicals in balance, they're quite enjoyable. We love having ours here, but in this instance that I talked about, it took forever fighting to get it back to where it should be. Algae had taken over my pool. It was disgusting. There were these little bugs that flicked around in the water, and it was absolutely horrible. It wasn't a place that you wanted to swim. My wife actually swore that the swamp thing must be living at the bottom of that pool. Now, granted, you definitely couldn't see the bottom of the pool, but even after I got it back in balance, I didn't run across this swamp thing that she was talking about, this swamp monster. You know, when we came home, I tested it the very first thing, and I already knew what the results were going to be. And sure enough, the pH was super high, and the chlorine levels were super low, and everything else was slightly out of whack. But those 2 things caused it to be a cesspool rather than being a swimming pool. And it just begs the analogy here about having everything in balance. Now imagine your organization as a swimming pool. To keep it inviting, clean, and safe, you need to balance various elements, just like I did with maintaining my pool. Now let's start with the most fundamental element that there is in maintaining a pool, and that's chlorine. So chlorine has a vital role to play in pool maintenance. It's essential for keeping a pool free of harmful bacteria and contaminants. In the same way, our integrity is crucial to be a leader. We need to maintain high ethical standards and address unethical behavior promptly to ensure a healthy organizational environment. Now, just as that chlorine disinfects the pool water, a leader's integrity cleanses the workplace, creating a space where trust can flourish in all of the team members. Now, I'm going to ask you the question. This is the only example that I'm going to use during this, but have you ever worked for a guy or gal with no integrity. This is the person that is dishonest, lacks accountability, is inconsistent, shows favoritism, has a lack of transparency, shows unethical behaviors, has that self-serving attitude. He disrespects people and has a total lack of commitment. Now, that's a lot. And some people don't have all of these, but they have quite a few of them. And I'm going to tell you right now, I worked for a guy once that met most of these qualities. And it was the worst experience I think I've ever had at work. It was horrendous. This guy had me struggling with demands that weren't even sensible. And the timelines, they couldn't be completed in the timelines. He had me set up to fail from the beginning. He also talked down about me in front of my peers. In front of my peers. And these guys, they would call me up and they'd be like, "Hey, Steve, what in the hell did you do to this guy to make him hate you so much?" I'd be like, "I don't know. I looked at him. I don't know. I've asked him, but he won't tell me." He also talked behind my back to some of my peers about if they would like my job after he got rid of me. I mean, this guy had zero integrity. And he would also not support me in anything that I was working on, even when I would directly ask him for help. I was about 1 week from taking another job when he left the organization, and things totally changed. And it was because of this one guy. So let's move on to that and talk about pH balancers. A pH's pool level, a pool's pH level needs to be just right. It needs to be not too acidic and not too basic. pH is everything. Similarly, leaders must balance empathy and assertiveness. Too much empathy without direction can lead to complacency in a team. But too much assertiveness can also create a very toxic atmosphere. So you have to strike that right balance to ensure a harmonious and productive team dynamic. People need to be challenged, but they also need to be respected as a person. You need to find that balance as a leader. Moving into our next chemical is to stabilize pH levels, we use alkalinity increaser. Think of this as building a strong foundation of core values and clear communication. Core values and clear communication within your team. It's so vitally important. This foundation acts as a buffer, preventing drastic shifts in morale or direction. When your team knows what you stand for and where they are heading, they can navigate these challenges that come before them more effectively. And this brings me into using stabilizers in the pool. Stabilizers in pool maintenance protects chlorine from the sun's rays. And when we protect the chlorine from the sun's rays, it ensures its effectiveness lasts longer. Now, as leaders, we need to protect our vision and our strategies from external pressures. By keeping a long-term perspective, we can sustain our efforts and guide our teams through both sunny days and stormy weather. But it's about keeping that stabilizer. It's about keeping that vision and that mission out in front of them. Going into algicides. Algicides prevent and control algae growth. as the name implies, which can quickly take over a pool if left unchecked. Similarly, leaders must be vigilant against toxic behaviors that can really disrupt a positive team culture. We need to proactively manage and foster a healthy environment to ensure that harmful elements don't take root and spread. And I like that take root example because algae actually has roots and it will bind into the pool itself, and you have to use a brush to knock it loose. So it's a lot easier just to stay in front of that algae. So let's talk about clarifiers next. Clarifiers really help make pool water crystal clear, as the name implies, which is essential for a pleasant swimming experience. It takes a while to get to this point. After you kill all the algae, it just kind of becomes cloudy and you have to clarify it. In leadership, clarity and transparency and communication are just as important. And I want to go back to that cloudy, right? It's easy to lose people's trust, but it stays cloudy for a while after you lose it. And you have to build it back, and it takes a while. But when leaders communicate clearly and openly, team members understand their roles, they understand their goals and their expectations, leading to a more cohesive and efficient organization. All right, here we get to the fun stuff. Let's talk about shock. And it's just the fun stuff because it's got a cool name, right? But shock really is what it says. It's a shock treatment. Occasionally, a pool needs a high dose of chlorine to eliminate contaminants and restore balance. I usually add this after a storm because you get things that blow in, things that come in with the rain. Similarly, leaders must be prepared to take decisive action during crisis, whether it's a major conflict or an unforeseen challenge. Sometimes bold steps are necessary to restore order, and they keep the team moving forward. But we got to be prepared as a leader to be able to take those really fast-hitting, decisive actions. So that was a lot of information on maintaining a pool, but it also helps you maintain your leadership effectiveness. So just like maintaining a pool, effective leadership requires a delicate balance, a balance of various elements by ensuring integrity, balanced emotions, building a strong foundation, keeping a long-term vision, preventing toxic behaviors, maintaining clarity, and being ready to address crisis. Leaders can create a pretty good, thriving, and productive environment. And it's hard to do, folks. We need to focus on it. We need to sharpen each and every one of those skills. We don't trip over them by accident. It's a skill set. All right, so thank you for joining me on this unique journey through pool maintenance and leadership. I hope these analogies help you reflect on your own leadership practices. But remember, just as a well-maintained pool provides a refreshing landscape, a well-led team can achieve remarkable things. So I want you to stay tuned for more insights and interviews on the Fire Forge Leader podcast. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and integrity. I hope today's episode is fodder to ignite that fire for leadership within you. Go out and start living that leadership life. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from this message. Also, follow us at Fire Forge Leader on all social media accounts for more insights and inspiration on leadership and personal growth.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.